friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to the My Favorite Things YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using bookworm bears. So I have stamped those images out on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Extreme Black Hybrid ink. And I'm going to be using a piece of pattern paper from the Party Time 6x6 to pull my color palette from for my Copic coloring. So I'm going to pull a piece out and tuck that under my cardstock panel, and then I can jump right in. For my bears, I wanted to pull out that dusty, deep brown that is right in the center of that pattern paper. You can see a little bit of that at the corner there. And so I pulled out E43, E44, E47, and E49. So if you only wanted to use 3 markers, you could probably leave off the E49. It is a very dark shade, but I like a lot of contrast in my coloring, and I wanted to match that deep, rich brown in that pattern paper. So I went ahead and added that in, but I also needed that lightest shade, the E43. Otherwise, the features would have really gotten lost on these sweet little images, and I really wanted their eyes and nose to be able to be seen clearly. So I started out laying in my shadows with that E49, and then I blended that out with the E47. I kept my darkest areas really close to the outside edges of the images. Like I said, I didn't want to lose their features, so I came in with the E44 next and began to pull that out a bit. And then my final shade, the highlight shade, is going to be the E43. And I'm going to really scrub over the edge of that E44 as I bring that color in toward the center, so I can make sure that I get a really nice smooth transition. And that really lightens up the face, as you can see. I'm going to finish coloring in the little hands and feet, and then I'll also color the pads of the feet with that E43. I'm going to color the other 2 bears in the same exact combo, but I am going to switch up the light source. I like to keep the face as the most highlighted area on my critters, so you can see those features like I mentioned. So I did the shadows on the outside edge for the first bear because he's facing completely forward, so his shadows were even on both the left and the right. But this little guy is facing toward the left, so his shadows are going to mostly fall down the back of his body. I also did add a little bit of shading on the bridge of his nose because I really wanted his snout to look pushed out like that, like almost that large forehead. That really cute feature is going to cast a shadow down on his face. So I'm going to do my blending exactly the same, just switching those shadows like I said, and then filling in with the lighter shades, especially that E43 is going to take up the majority of the bear. And I am doing a second layer on all of these bears off screen just to save some time in the video. It does really help, especially with the darker shades, to smooth out your blending and just increase the saturation. You can see that there's some lines there where the E43 meets the E44. There's like little rings of color where that E43 pushed the darker shade back. And that is going to get cleared up so much better with the second layer of coloring. So for the last bear, I just switched his shadows as well. Since he's facing now toward the right, his shadows are going to fall mostly on the left. And again, because he has that adorable large head, I did put a little shadow on his bum as if the head is kind of casting a shadow toward the back of his body. So I've worked my way down to the E44 on this guy, and then I'm going to come in with that lightest shade, that E43, fill in most of his face. I didn't add any to his paws because they were kind of up by his face where they wouldn't be really getting much light, but I did add a touch to his foot. And then I'm also going to use that E44 to color in the tree trunk in the book that he is reading. And then I pulled in the E41 to color in the book pages for that book, and then also added a little bit to the 2 that the others are reading as well, just those inside pages. Then I'm going to add some rosy cheeks to my bears using R20 and R22. So I'm going to do a little oval shape right under the eye with the R22. I'll also add a little color to the insides of their ears. And then I will trace around the oval shape on the cheek with the R20 and blend out the ear with that as well. I added in the R24 and I'm going to do the book that the bear in the center is holding. And I'm trying to mimic that kind of coral pink that is right next to the red stripe in that pattern paper. I put the R24 down at the bottom of the book where it's tipped down away from the light, blended up with the R22 and then the R20. And then I'm going to do one of the little houses over on the right. I think these are meant to be stamped on some of the books, but I thought that they would make really cute little block toys. So I stamped out 3 of those. And then I added in R29 to color in the door and the little window. Then I'm going to move on to the darker blue in that pattern paper. And I chose BG05, BG07, and BG09. I started out with the BG09, but as I was coloring, I realized that my BG07 is actually darker than my BG09. So I went back over what I had already done with that BG07, and then I'm going to switch back to the BG09 to blend that out a bit. And just carry that color up and towards the top 2 corners. I want the top 2 corners to be the lightest, so I'm going to color those in with the BG05, just pulling that mid-tone toward this highlighted shade. And then I ended up deciding that I needed a 4th shade as well because I just needed more transition there. So I pulled in the BG02 and finish the corners of the book with that. And then I'm going to come over to another one of these houses and color them with the darkest 3 shades. And then I'll do the door and the window with the very darkest shade, just like I did on the red house. So it really just looks like a little toy block that is shaped like a house. Then I'm going to pull in the darker green in this pattern paper, and I'm going to do the sweater on the bear in the middle. I chose G43, G46, and G99, and I think that gives me a nice transition from dark to light on there. That's a really nice combo. I'll also do the last woodblock house. And for that door and window, I just went back to my G99 since it's such a dark color already. And then I'm also going to do a touch of color on the treetop and the grass in the book using the G43. And then I added a bit of the G46 to the treetop as well. And then I went in to pull in that golden yellow stripe in the pattern paper. So I chose G32, G35, and G38 for the last little bear's sweater. I did his shadow on his back, just like I did on his tail. But that combo was looking a little bit pale compared to that pattern paper, so I did throw in the Y13 to go over the Y32 and just brighten that up a bit. And then I'm going to take BG000 and add a little bit of sky to the pages of the book that the bear is reading. And then I will grab a black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and just go over the eyes of the bears and make them really nice and bright and shiny. And then I'll trim these images out with their coordinating dies. For the background, I've taken a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock and cut that out with the second largest of the wonky stitched rectangle dies. And I'm going to use some Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide ink because it was a very nice match for the aqua shade in that pattern paper, or the pale blue. So I'm just going to blend that on in the center, making sure to use a light pressure because I really just want a light haze of this in kind of like a circular shape toward the top of the panel. Then I wanted to add a bit more interest to it, so I took some water and spritzed that onto an acrylic block so that I can pick it up with a paintbrush. This just gives me a little bit more control. I'm going to splatter that all over that background, let it react with that Distress Oxide ink for a couple of seconds, and then I'll blot that up with a paper towel. Then I wanted to add some splatter with that tumbled glass, so I'm going to add that to an acrylic block, add a bit more water to that to make it a little more fluid, and then I'll tap that all over the background as well, so I get some nice small droplets. And they were looking a little bit dark. I wanted them to be softer, so I'm going to blot that up with a paper towel as well. And then I also wanted to add a bit of gold splatter, so I grabbed my Gansai Tambi Starry Colors, and I'm going to splatter with that as well. And I'm holding my finger up pretty high, so I get really small droplets for this one, because I just wanted it to be a subtle accent. And then I'm going to set this panel aside to dry completely. Once it has, I will pop it in my MISTI so that I can stamp my sentiment down at the bottom. I'm using some VersaFine Onyx Black ink because the Bristol Smooth Surface is a very slick surfaced cardstock, so this ink just works really well on it. I'm going to stamp that down twice to make sure that that sentiment is nice and bold and clearly legible. And then I'll set this focal panel aside and pop my card base in my MISTI. I've created a standard A2 size card out of some snow cone cardstock, and I have folded that at the top, so I have a top fold, and I'm going to stamp on the inside using the 4th bear in this little stamp set and another one of the sentiment that says "No one stacks up to you," which goes so cute with his little stack of books. So I stamped that down a couple of times as well, and now I am ready to start assembling my scene. I'm going to take that pattern paper and I'm going to trim that down with the largest of the wonky stitch rectangle stacks. And I made sure to die cut that pattern paper so that the stripes are going horizontally rather than vertically, because it reminded me of a stack of books, which kind of ties in to the stamping on the inside of the card. Then I added some foam tape to the back of my focal panel to give that a bit of lift and centered that on the card and popped it into place. Then I'll bring in my images and arrange them on that focal panel so that I know where I want them to go before I start adding glue and get them secured, because the glue that I use dries very quickly, so once you've laid it down it's very hard to adjust. So I'm just going to put those 3 little bears around, and then I'll have the book in front of the bear that's on his tummy, and then the little block houses kind of arranged around them. Once I like the arrangement, I can start to adhere those down with my liquid glue. I also made sure to arrange those little block houses so that the color is not next to another color that is similar on the scene. So the red house is down kind of diagonal away from the red book, and then the green house is further down away from the green sweater, and then the blue house is kind of diagonal from the blue book. That way your eye just gets drawn around the scene because the pops of color appear here and there, and it just is more visually appealing, I think. So I'm going to add those little block houses now. They are a little bit tiny to work with, so you could use a pair of tweezers if they're hard to hold on to with your fingernails, or I just used the pin from my nozzle of my glue to kind of make sure that they were straight on the card. I decided not to add any glitter or sequins to this one. I wanted to keep it gender neutral, but I did add a little R11 to the pads of that one bear's feet. And that is going to finish off my card for today. So I'll lift that up so you can see that shimmer of the gold splatter. And there is another peek at the inside. I really hope you guys enjoyed the August edition of Christy Gets Crafty with My Favorite Things. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I love chatting with you guys. Subscribe to My Favorite Things for more inspiring videos just like these here on screen. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.